Record.
Good morning, councillors. Welcome to our representation review hearings and deliberations this morning. I'll start the meeting by giving our open statement about live streaming. I remind councillors and staff that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and that the recording will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting. I further remind all present that the local government decision-making affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. So I'm sure we won't be needing to worry about that right now, but I'd just like to remind you before we have our opening karakia to, if you're speaking, to turn on your microphones for the sake of the people that are on Zoom. So I'd now like to invite Councillor Crosby to give an opening karakia. Oh, Tataru. Oh, you're there. Tataru, would you mind giving an opening karakia?
Okay. Yeah, kia ora no tātou, kei noi tātou. He honore he krore ki te atua, he maunga aronga ki te mato te whenua whakaaro pai ki ngā tāngata katoa ame. Hānge te ato he ngā kauhau ki roto ki tēnā ki tēnō mātou. Whakatoi o tō wairua tapu hei a whina, hei toho tohi o mātou, whiti whakaaro, whiti kōrero, ringi te kaupapa, e rungi te kaupapa mui a tātou tēnei rā, kuhi karai te koto mātou kai whakaaro.
Thank you. We have apologies from Councillor von Darelson, and Chairman Leader has not come on Zoom. Are there any further apologies?
Madam Chair, I will have to leave a bit early. Unfortunately, I've got another commitment that's quite urgent that I need to attend to.
Yes, and we'll take apologies for Councillor Eatey. So could I have a move and a second to accept? Thank you, Councillor Campbell and Councillor McMillan. Sorry, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Aye. It's carried. There are no public forum items. Are there any other items to be added to the agenda? There are none. We have no proposed change to the order of business. So we move on to conflicts of interest. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Does not appear so. And there is no business to be transferred into the open. However, I just want to note that in the hearings report, that's agenda item 8.1, there is a confidential attachment. And if there is to be any discussion on that confidential attachment, we will have to move into confidential at that point. However, we're now entering the section of the meeting where we receive submissions, and I'm very happy to welcome Jessie Brennan, representing the Federated Farmers, is here to give their submission. So welcome, Jessie, please sit down. We will be inviting councillors to ask any questions of clarification after you've finished your submission. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the welcome. Good morning, councillors. So my name is Jessie Brennan. I'm a Senior Policy Advisor with Federated Farmers based in our North Island Regional Policy team and based out of Bay of Plenty. So we just got an office on Grey Street here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the Federated Farmers submission today. I appreciate I'm the only person speaking here, so it's great to have the opportunity to talk to you and answer any questions and any discussion you might have. So some of you may or may not be aware of Federated Farmers, but just by way of introduction or as a reminder, Federated Farmers is a not-for-profit primary sector policy and advocacy organisation. We represent the majority of farming interests and businesses in New Zealand. We have a long and proud history of representing these interests and being involved in policy at all different levels. And we're a membership-based organisation, so farmers choose to pay to be a member with Federated Farmers. We have over 640 members within the Bay of Plenty region, and I take our submission as already being read. So today I'm just going to focus on a few key points from our submission and then happy to open for discussion and any questions. So as you would have seen, the focus of our submission was really around the Eastern Bay of Plenty constituency. Would also just like to take the opportunity once again to thank Council at the last representation review for allowing 2 councillors to represent the Eastern Bay constituency, which is sort of one more than what the population rule under the Local Electoral Act would usually allow. We were definitely very thankful to get that additional representation. However, we still do think there is improvement to be made on representation, and that's why the focus of our submission was looking at an additional councillor for Eastern Bay of Plenty. And this is really based on 3 key reasons. So as you would have seen in the submission in Appendix 1, I've done some pretty rough and ready calculations around rates takes and how much is actually coming from Eastern Bay, at least at a very high level. And so approximately 26% of the rates take, based on my figures, is coming out of Eastern Bay. Happy to be corrected on that information, just sort of what I managed to cobble together from various different sources of information. The other key reason for asking for an additional councillor is around some of the core functions that Regional Council undertakes in Eastern Bay of Plenty, which includes things such as water management, science, rivers and drainage schemes, and those sorts of activities. It's also important to note that Eastern Bay of Plenty ratepayers, or many of them, pay significant rates. You would have seen an example in there about one farmer who pays 150 grand on targeted rates for the rivers and drainage schemes, and we've got a lot of examples with other people down there that pay similar sort of sums. And I acknowledge that there's definitely benefits that sort of farmers and the wider communities get down there, but there's sort of a wider public good that comes out of these schemes as well, just as one example. So these costs are borne by fewer people compared to those that live in urban areas. And something I often get when I'm talking with farmers that are located in the Eastern Bay constituency is they feel like that decisions that may impact their farming operations and rural communities are being made by people that may or may not fully understand what actually happens at a practical level on their farms. And that's quite I know that's quite a general statement, but it's how a lot of people are feeling in rural areas in particular. So yeah, if people feel like there's a bit more space here to ensure that there's a bit more representation for the Eastern Bay of Plenty. I also understand that a few other submitters have made similar sort of arguments to Bay of Plenty in terms of wanting an additional councillor for Eastern Bay of Plenty. So I guess that does sort of show that this is a live issue for many people in the constituency. So ultimately, Federated Farmers believes that Bay of Plenty Regional Council has a real and meaningful opportunity here to, I guess, enhance representation in Eastern Bay of Plenty. And this would result in a strengthened voice, both for rural communities, but more isolated communities as well. So that's why we're asking for a redistribution of the councillors. So that would result in 3 councillors for Eastern Bay and 4 for Tauranga City. I also just have one correction, so thanks to Steve for pointing that out. So in Appendix 1 of the submission, where I go through the calculations for the rates take, I've accidentally left off 3 zeros from the Tauranga City general rates take, which is a pretty important thing, but I can assure you that the calculations were based with those original, the 3 zeros added. I just haven't included it in the table. So the figures should be there or thereabouts, but yeah, please forgive me for that minor error in the table. So thank you again for your time, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions and have any discussion on the submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessie. Very clear. Do I have any questions of clarification from councillors? Ken.
Jessie, just one clarification. One of your strong arguments that I heard for you requesting greater representation from the Eastern Bay was for someone who would sort of understand farming and what happens on the farm, which I certainly understand. But how would that guarantee that? Because you could get a townie who had no appreciation of farming whatsoever coming out of the Eastern Bay.
Absolutely, and I totally appreciate that point. It's at the whim of the populations and who actually ends up getting selected, right? I guess if we move from having 2 to 3, I guess that's another opportunity to have someone else to stand and potentially go into that into that position. So it's ultimately up to who puts their hand up and decides to go for the position, right? But I guess people feel like if there's an additional person, there's better chances of potentially having further representation.
Councillor Crosby.
Yeah, thanks, Jessie, for the input into that submission. It's quite comprehensive, so thank you for that. Couple of questions. One, rates collection is one metric, but expenditure is the other. Have you put any thought into what expenditure goes into the Eastern Bay? That's one question. The second one is with regard to the targeted rates for river schemes mainly, which really boosts, particularly in the cost to farmers. But they also have their own sub-governance in terms of river schemes, which have committees which have really local input. So do you not think that that's actually a really good form of governance in terms of that subsidiarity right down to, local communities having a say in terms of budgets around their river schemes and design and things like that?
Absolutely, yes. So in terms of your first question about the expenditure coming out of Eastern Bay, no, that's not something I sort of considered for this process. We did get involved in the long-term plan process, and so sort of have a very high level understanding of sort of where the budget's coming from and what that might look like and where it might be spent over the next few years and things. But for this process, didn't consider that. Yes, trying to keep it a little bit high level and appreciate I'm a policy advisor, not really a sort of analytical person in terms of numbers and figures and things. So but totally appreciate that point. In terms of your second one, in terms of the rivers drainage schemes and the committees and I guess the local governance thing, fully support that. And we have a lot of farmers and members that do get involved in those processes as well. And I think that has a very important role to play, definitely. I guess the point we're trying to make with this submission is that we want to see it all the different levels and across the different the breadth of sort of all the different activities that we have across Bay of Plenty Regional Council activities as well. So definitely don't want to take away from that those local governance sort of committees and things that are happening there. But we do just want to sort of push for a little bit of redistribution sort of at the council level as well.
Thank you. Just want to note that Councillor Eadie has joined us online. He's our Eastern Bay representative. And now we have a question from Councillor McDonald. Thanks.
Thanks for your presentation. I just want to pose a question. You talk about you have 2 current councillors in the Eastern Bay. You actually have 3 current councillors in the Western Bay. You haven't taken into consideration the Māori constituent representative. And I guess my question is, why not? Because the Māori councils that sit on here, it's just not Māori issues that we cover. We cover issues across the board. And you have a representative there that is quite conversant with the area, born and bred to the area, so has an extensive knowledge of your constituency. But I was just concerned that you didn't actually take that into consideration as a representative of your constituency. And I guess I posed the question, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely appreciate that point. And I guess sorry. We definitely support the Māori constituencies that are in there, and I guess the focus of the submission was really around the local government constituencies, and I guess I haven't purposefully sort of excluded the Māori constituency representative. I guess the focus of our submission was really around the redistribution of the remaining councillors, and we put in there that we support the Māori constituency. So that's probably just a fault on my part for not sort of focusing on that in terms of what I've discussed today. So my apologies, but I definitely take your point there, and it's a really important form of representation as well.
Thank you. There are no further questions. So Jessie, thank you very much for coming and giving your time today. You're very welcome to stay and listen to our deliberations. We'll be deliberating straight after this. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for the questions. Thanks.
So councillors, we have some recommendations here attached to this report. So we do not require recommendation 2 because we had no late submissions and we did not receive any tabled documents. But is there any discussion on the publicly excluded version of the attachment? Because if we do, I'm going to have to move us into confidential. Doesn't appear so. So do I have a mover and a seconder for the report? Thank you, Councillor Scott, and seconded by Councillor Shirley. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. So now we move on to our next paper, and we welcome Steve and I'm having a terrible time. Claudia, well, my brain is fused or something. We welcome them to present to us the representation deliberations report. Welcome.
Thank you. Morning, councillors. Probably not too much commentary. We'll let the report speak for itself. Just to quickly summarise the feedback we received. So starting with the general constituencies, I think it was great to have Jessie here this morning because her view represented submissions from other people. I think there were about 5 submissions with the theme around increasing representation in Eastern Bay of Plenty. I think the report sets out the consequences of taking the decision to shift one Tauranga councillor into Eastern Bay of Plenty in terms of that fair representation. I guess I'd make the point that it's not without precedent to have a plus or minus in the 55% region. There's 3 regional councils by my reckoning that currently do that. The distinguishing feature is that those regional councils only have 1 councillor in those seats where there's that stretch. So that's much smaller regional councils, and they've basically had to do that to have a constituency represented is possibly the difference. But yeah, I just wanted to basically say if that was a decision that you wanted to take, there is precedent for those kind of levels without wanting to predetermine what local government commission might or might not agree with. It would also mean obviously that Tauranga swings out. So at the moment, I think Tauranga is about 11%, and it would take Tauranga out to about 30% underrepresented. On the Māori constituencies, there was a small amount of feedback regarding matters that you considered fairly thoroughly in the workshop, and that was largely around the Kaituna River, so unifying the Kaituna River, bringing Makatu into Okarai constituency. I think our view on that is, as staff, is that you'd be bringing together quite disparate communities of interest, like the Lakes communities of interest with, say, Makatu, a more coastal community. And while there was feedback on doing it, it was a small number of people. And I understand that the Māori councillors have had conversations with, with people about that, and it's certainly not a view of the entire community on that. That's probably all I wanted to say by way of introduction. So I'll hand it over for questions, discussion.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? It appears not. A very clear report and a succinct summary, so thank you for that. So now it's time for us to deliberate on the report and the recommendations. So I open the floor for comments. Councillor Crosby.
So I'll start off. Look, first of all, thank you, Steve and Claudia, because you'll recall prior to this, we looked at a range of options, quite a large range of options. And this is never a pure science. I think we have to agree with that. And I do have personally a degree of a sympathy for the East, and it's not necessarily, and even Rotorua for that point, it's not necessarily a money game as per the Federation Farmers representative. It's a whole lot of other things. It's the workload, etc., etc. But we are constrained within reason by a process in the legislation, and I think what we have come to here is a sustainable decision, which is important because ultimately other bodies may make this decision, not us, which would be the Local Government Commission, if it's appealed and if they choose to make some amendments, which are prone to do from time to time, without any kind of reason, from my experience. But I think where we've landed is a good balance. And I make the point, just because you don't necessarily, we are a Bay of Plenty council, and we take an oath to represent the whole Bay of Plenty. In my case, not just Tauranga constituency, and vice versa. Councillor Campbell takes, I'm assuming, as much interest here as he would in his patch, and that happens all around the place. So I don't think we'd assume we just come in and bat for our particular patch. And I've seen that in this particular council, which I believe is incredibly strong from a governance point of view. So personally, I do have some sympathy about what could be seen as an imbalance, particularly in Rotorua and the east, but I think we've landed in a good spot.
Very much, Councillor Crosbie. I have some commentary from Councillor Thurston. Welcome, Councillor Thurston.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It is what it is, and I agree with Councillor Crosbie. The decision is sustainable, but I do have to remind us that with the reforms of local government back in 1989, Rotorua had 4 representatives, and we subsequently were reduced from 4 to 3 to 2. And of course, we have Councillor White with us also. But you can't argue against population statistics, and we just go on ad infinitum here in Rotorua trying to explain why the wealth and the amount of support and numbers is based in the Western Bay of Plenty, but you can't argue against it. But it does come with a high degree of grief, I can assure you, on this neck of the woods. But no, I'll support the recommendations. We'll just continue to argue for greater representation and hopefully a larger population in Rotorua. But colleagues, just be mindful of or cognizant of the fact that, since 1989, Rotorua in particular has gone from 4 to 3 to 2, plus Councillor White. Kia ora.
Councillor White, you have a question?
Yeah, kia ora, Madam Chair. Look, I support the comments from Councillor Thurston of 2 plus Councillor White. I support the recommendations that have been made, and so I just wanted to make that statement.
Thank you for that. Any further commentary? Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, look, thank you very much for the staff and all the work that has gone behind the representation review. I have to acknowledge exactly what my colleagues have already talked about. Can I just acknowledge also Councillor McDonald's comments about our Kohi representative? He happens to be very versed with what goes on in the whole of the Bay of Plenty region. Chairs our Rivers Committee in the East, and along with Councillor Shirley, who has to stand in for him at occasions. So that's much appreciated. I have to say that it's been a learning curve for me coming out of the East after 27 years of battling to get better representation in the East, but I think we've come to a really good place here. Just thank you very much, I have to say, to Jessie for supporting the representation review, and knowing that we've got 640 members in her organisation that see it a little bit different to what everybody else sees. But I have to say that I think we're at a very good position here. Once again, I must acknowledge my 3 Māori colleagues around the table. They have as much input into the rest of it right across the Bay of Plenty region. We just need to acknowledge that. So thank you very much for that.
I've got Councillor Winters and then Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. Morning, colleagues. Thank you to Steve and Claudia for the report. Very comprehensive. Thank you to Feds and all those other submitters. I think we've got a bit of a consensus going forward that's status quo. And I'm happy with where we've landed, Madam Chair. I'm just happy to move recommendation on page 61, 62. And yeah, that's enough said. Message ends.
Thank you. If we are considering that motion, we will not need recommendation 9. So it would be recommendations 1 to 8 if we go with the status quo. But I will pass over to Councillor McMillan for comments.
Oh, kia ora, thank you. And I do support the recommendations. And I just wanted to highlight how lucky I think we are to have our Māori elected members and how amazing it is to work on a council with Māori wards. And I just feel really, really sad for the rest of the motu that may be faced with some challenges in that space. So I think it's something that we should be extremely proud of and celebrate. And anyone who was elected onto this council would be able to see with their own eyes the benefits of that. So we're really lucky, and I'm thankful we don't have to go through what the rest of the country is going through now. So just wanted to make that, even though it's not really to do with this, because we don't have to consider that in our representation. But I'm just saying I'm so glad we don't, and just wanted to celebrate that. Thank you.
Any further comments from those that haven't spoken? Councillor Scott.
Really to support the status quo, and to say how important it is that that we have, in theory, that over-representation, because that local knowledge from areas outside of Tauranga is vital to the running of this council. And so if anyone was thinking about reducing that amount, that it'd be a catastrophe, in my opinion.
Councillor Shirley.
Yes, I certainly support the recommendations. Just a follow-up point, though, that I didn't make when addressing Federated Farmers Submission, and that is just emphasising the point that sector group interests are not necessarily tied to geographies. And a good example would be my predecessor, Norm Brunning, who was a dairy farmer, but Western Bay, and he had an understanding of farming across the whole region. So I think that was a weakness in their argument, another weakness in their argument in terms of sector group interests being tied to specific geographies.
Well, it seems that we've got a fairly clear consensus, and I'd just like to add my comments, and that is that I also support the status quo, but I just want to reinforce the point that we, whichever part of the region we represent, we take a huge interest over the whole region. And a good example of that was recently there was a councillor trip into the east where we went up and visited with Te Whānau Apanui and had a really good look around. So that is a way of making sure that we all touch the Eastern Bay of Plenty and understand the issues. So given that, I just ask if we have a second to the motion. Thank you,
Councillor Winter's motion.
Thank you. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, everybody. So there's no questions on the public excluded attachment, so we won't be moving into confidential. So I guess it's time for us to close the meeting. I'll just wait for Tone to